is former presidential campaign advisor for Newt Gingrich and president of Spieckerman Media, Lee Spieckerman. Lee, what do you make of these exit interviews, comments from President Obama? Can you believe it? Throwing shade at the president-elect.
Well, I think President Obama would definitely have been a better candidate than Hillary Clinton. And I wrote back in 2013 and updated it early in 2016 that I thought Michelle Obama would have been a far more formidable Democratic nominee than Hillary Clinton. You know, Barack Obama is a singular political talent, and had he run, the strength would have been based on his enormous political talent, certainly not his policies. Donald Trump was completely right on that. His policies were repudiated every time there was an election where he was not on the ballot in 2010 and 2014. But he's a singular political talent. I think Bill Clinton would have won a third term as well, and probably Ronald Reagan would have. So, you know, we've had in the past 100 years very few singular political talents, Franklin Roosevelt, Jack Kennedy, you know, Ronald Reagan, Bill Clinton, and I would put Barack Obama in that class. Unfortunately, his policies were devastating economically and in
and of course
overseas.
That's of course what we heard the president-elect in that tweet, Steve Forbes. I want to get you in here. He did respond by saying, no, I don't think so. You know, these are the policies that people were voting against that have driven jobs out of the country, et cetera. But there's also the question, and Newt Gingrich sort of addressed this, should the president-elect be responding to this, and on Twitter, of all places?
Well, he's been doing it, and he's going to continue to do it, and he's not yet president, so he can take a jab if he wants to when he feels like it. In this case, it was justified. Every president has ambivalent feelings about successor. What Obama said was a real slap at Hillary Clinton, just as Bill Clinton slapped Al Gore, saying I could have won and he couldn't. And so, well, that's normal human nature. But the fact of the matter is, other than Ronald Reagan in 1988, where George Bush did get, in effect, a third Ronald Reagan term, Dwight Eisenhower could have gotten a third term. The others could not. Harry Truman tried for effectively a third term, got crushed in New Hampshire. Johnson, same thing in 1968. And in terms of Obama in 2016, he had 8 years to do all the glorious things he said he'd do, and he failed. He almost lost in 2012. He only won re-election because of a singularly inept campaign by the Republicans and Mitt Romney, and he should never have gotten a second term. Third term, he would have lost. He could not say, he couldn't blame it on George W. Bush.
But then you were reminded, though, Lee, when I was watching that, I was reminded of that warm, cozy moment that they shared at the White House where they shook hands when Trump became the president-elect, and he said he'd be willing to counsel him, and he's a phone call away, and then
there it is. I mean, that lasted, what, 24 hours before they're at each other? I do think, though, that this is really, the big story here, and as you just mentioned, is about he's really dissing Hillary Clinton. And so I think what this is showing even more than anything is that the Democrat Party is really in disarray. They're not on the same page. They're not, you know, moving the same direction. To say that, you know, I could have gotten the message right and it would have been different, and that's really, that's a real jab.
And that got to the whole thing. What was the message? Another 8 years of stagnation and chaos abroad? Tough sell.
All right. And meanwhile, President Obama, Lee, is taking more action before leaving office. This past week, he moved to ban oil drilling in parts of the Arctic and Atlantic Ocean, and he's reportedly planning more detainee transfers out of Guantanamo Bay. Former House Speaker Newt Gingrich weighed in on these installments on Fox News Sunday. I want you to listen, and we'll get you on the other side.
President Obama is beginning to figure out that his legacy is like one of those dolls that as the air comes out of it, shrinks and shrinks and shrinks. And that 60 or 70% of his legacy is executive orders, almost all of which will be repudiated by Trump. And he's in this desperate frenzy. What he's actually doing is he's setting up a whole series of things to distract Trump, which will make his liberal allies feel good about Democrats and hate Republicans when Trump rolls them all back.
Lee, you know Speaker Gingrich. You worked with him in the past. What did you make of his comments and Obama's actions at the 11th hour of his presidency?
Well, of course, I agree with Newt on that. 70% of his legacy could be repealed, and this terrible offshore oil exploration and drilling ban can certainly be repealed. That's based on a 1952 law. It's fantasy to say that a Republican Congress can't overturn that law, and it needs to be overturned. We've got to have energy independence in this country, not only for economic reasons, but for national security reasons. That's absolutely crucial. We've got to stop funding ISIS, which, in effect, we do when we prop up the world oil price by not producing as much energy as we can here in the United States. And so that's just one more thing for President Trump and the Republican Congress to repeal, which they will, focusing on those repeals as well as getting quick confirmations of the wonderful cabinet that President-elect Trump has named. That has to be the priority, quickly followed by repealing and replacing Obamacare.
Yeah, I mean, what do you make of this final push that we're seeing from the president here in his final days in office?
Well, he's realizing he's leaving office and there's not much he can do about it, so he's throwing out a lot of stuff, figuring it would take a lot of time to undo what they're doing. The Senate's going to be really dragged down with these cabinet confirmations, so it's just negativity is all they have to offer. She had nothing to offer other than say she doesn't like Donald Trump, Hillary Clinton during the campaign, and now they have nothing to offer other than to say we're going to fight every inch of the way. They lost, but they can't accept it. You know, the Lions lost last night to the Cowboys. Get over it.
Yeah, that was terrific, by the way. I'm in a very good mood this morning because of that.
But, you know, I mean, there's a lot of people who are saying, oh, can you really act shocked by this? I mean, we did see this coming. I mean, this last-ditch effort to seal his legacy.
Yeah, there's no question that this is not a surprise. It's exactly what we expect. And we know that Donald Trump says the first thing he's going to do is undo all of these things he's done. So it's a really interesting time to see. The case isn't necessarily being made by Obama on these things. He's just acting instead of making or persuading people that these are the right decisions to make. But that's really an issue that the Democrat Party has had throughout this whole cycle.
All right, a lot going on this morning.
He's setting he set a bad precedent for Trump, too, because his philosophy was you can impeach me. That's your only alternative to the executive orders. And what we're going to see is Donald Trump is going to, when he has to, use executive orders, even though he's made a point of saying that he wants the Congress to approve things to do it the right way. But I think the Democrats are going to rue the day that they tried to run the country with executive orders.
All right. Lee Spieckerman, thank you for joining us this morning. Good to have you, sir.